I don't have a song screwdriver to flourish with when it comes to the Fifth Doctor, because he had to go and let it get destroyed by the pteroleptils. Good going there. I mean, so what can I flourish with now? I don't have a cricket bat. So we're back again with more Doctor Who episode spotlights, and we're going to continue on from my autobiographical approach to talking about some of the Doctor Who stories that actually had a big impact on my life. Now, the one we're going to talk about now isn't necessarily a great one, particularly in the grand scheme of the fandom. However, it was one that, when I was starting out as a Doctor Who fan, actually turned out to be a vital stepping stone, because the one thing I can actually give to it is that when you're a new Doctor Who fan and you're jumping into the classic series and there's still a lot about the Doctors that you don't know and that you haven't seen a lot of them, this is actually a good kind of Cliff Notes intro version, one that very delicately throws in a lot of great Easter eggs and does actually feature a lot of the staples of Doctor Who fandom. Despite all this, it is still not a great story, especially when you compare it to a lot of other ones that attempted the same thing this one did to much greater success. The story in question we're going to talk about today is The Five Doctors. Now, as you recall, with the Inferno review, I had pointed out that there was a PBS channel that was showing all the Jon Pertwee episodes in succession, in chronological order, and I was wondering why were they doing that. Well, I ended up finding out the hard way is that right before the TV movie aired, we found out that Jon Pertwee had just passed away. And right when I was really enjoying Jon Pertwee and really kind of realizing what a great show this was and how he was such an incredible doctor, this wounded me. I was so sad to find out that this doctor that I was really starting to invest time in and who was really selling me on this eccentric little British oddity, and to find out that he had passed on very recently, just like that year, that was something I thought was incredibly sad. Well, my mom, at the time, worked at a local Blockbuster Video, and against all odds, their Blockbuster actually did have some Doctor Who episodes on VHS, and the one in question was The Five Doctors. And when she grabbed it, she thought it was a documentary, and that's a safe bet, and so I popped it in thinking I was going to get a good comprehensive documentary on the Five Doctors, but no, it actually turned out to be a full-blown adventure with a doctor, and in this case it was the Fifth Doctor, played by Peter Davison. I will say my first impression of him was that he was really tan, a lot of muted, earthy tones there, and I was kind of confused about the celery. I wasn't really familiar with the game of cricket at the time. I heard of it, you know, thanks to Ninja Turtles.
Cricket? Nobody understands cricket. You gotta know what a crumpet is to understand cricket.
But I wasn't really familiar with how the customary attire was at the time, so I didn't realize he was going for a cricketing motif. The story also throws you in with Tegan, with Turlough, and again, did not really know them that well. They were just companion. And fortunately, Tegan, even though my opinion of her has changed dramatically, and we'll get to those at later times, I will say in The Five Doctors, she actually was a lot of fun, very gutsy, and actually had a really good camaraderie with Turlough and the Doctor in this episode. In this episode, mind you. And actually, it does actually start very nice with them at the Eye of Orion, where they're there just to admire the scenery. And it is a beautiful scene when they kick off, when you see Turlough sketching the landscape. It's a beautiful scene. And then, very strange things afoot when these hands are manipulating a control column, and then the Fifth Doctor convulses from pain because parts of his life are being taken away from him, and that's where we lead into all the other Doctors being swept up by, depending on which version you watch, either a black triangle or a swirly Casper ghost thing. And it's there that the Fifth Doctor realizes that parts of his life are being taken away and sent to some unknown point, and that he himself will be following suit. And that's when they find themselves in the Death Zone at Gallifrey, and they're all being sent to the Death Zone in order to play the game of Rassilon and find the ultimate prize, which legend states is immortality. I'll remain spoiler-free on this, but this unseen villain is grabbing the Doctor in all of his prior incarnations, sending him to the Death Zone in the chance to even the odds in order to get up to the Dark Tower in the center of the Death Zone in order to break down the force field so this person can go in there and achieve the prize of immortality. Now, I get why this person will grab all the Doctors because, you know, the Doctor is the Doctor. He's, you know, the ultimate Gallifreyan badass, so all of them combined to go up there. I mean, smart move. Send the sheep out into the minefield, clear out the dangers, and clear a path so that way you can come in and take the prize. Very smart. But what I'm going is like, why wouldn't you just throw them in there and just leave them at it? Why would you also bring in Cybermen and Daleks, all these things where it's like, there was a Dalek there, and they were assuming that the Daleks were there left over from the games, and same thing with the Yeti, and it's doesn't really make sense, particularly when you take into account the temporal coordinates. But again, since when has Doctor Who ever really been 100% concrete in their continuity? Time travel, it's a mess. This person also brought in Cybermen, and also the Master as well, and he's like just saying it's a game within a game, and I'm like, wouldn't this get in the way of your prize? But really, when you think about it, all these are just excuses for Doctor Who to celebrate itself. And there's a reason why it's celebrating itself, because The Five Doctors was meant to be the 20th anniversary celebration of the show. So what you need is just a basic plot in order to get all the Doctors together in one spot and bring in all the monsters that made Doctor Who the staple it became for 20 years. And to that end, it does serve as a very affectionate celebration, and I will say it is a lot of fun to watch. Now, the returning Doctors, John Pertwee, Patrick Troughton, absolute delight. Now, I will say this, when I was starting out watching Doctor Who, I had still not seen William Hartnell, actually, at that time. To his credit, Richard Hurndall actually did fool me. I actually thought I was watching William Hartnell perform, and he does a really great job bringing out the character, very much in the same way David Bradley did an incredible job bringing out the first Doctor when he did Twice Upon a Time. So I was fooled, and I was still able to accept that this person was William Hartnell. So credit where it's due. Now, the one that everyone kept telling me, oh, you're getting into Doctor Who, oh, you gotta watch Tom Baker. And I was like going, okay, great, I get to see this legendary Tom Baker everyone's talking about. Yeah, that didn't happen. Now, here's the story. Tom Baker was courted to come back and be part of this, and he was tempted, but he had only been out of the role at this point for 2 years, and he was still trying to establish himself as a consummate actor outside the role of Doctor Who. If ever there was a Doctor Who actor who did have a problem with typecasting, it was Tom Baker. So he was afraid to come back to the role so soon after leaving it, and it's a good reason why. So he bowed out and he said he wouldn't do it. So two things happened as a result of his leaving the project. Firstly, they actually had to come up with a pretty effective solution at the time. They took pre-existing footage from the lost episode Shada and intercut it in the story, and to their credit, it actually fits. And as another positive effect, they actually used that as a great platform for when they did the radio animated webcast of Shada back in 2003 with Paul McGann, and actually used that as a good kickoff for it. So a lot of good things came from that decision. But the other thing, which is even funnier, and anyone who was involved with the production laugh about it to this very day, is that when they were doing the promotional shoots for it, well, obviously Tom Baker wasn't there, so they actually grabbed Tom Baker's wax statue from Madame Tussauds House of Wax, and there are a slew of great photos where, sure, they'll do the serious one, that they're trying their best to make it look like Tom Baker's actually there, but then you've got a whole bunch of them mocking the statue with Tom Baker. And there was actually another good reason why Tom Baker bowed out, because as we know, in the course of the story, the Fifth Doctor is actually able to make his way back to the Capitol from the Death Zone, and he himself is able to figure out who is responsible for all this. And really, when you think about it, that's the right way to go, because he is the current iteration of the Doctor. He should be the one to move the story forward. In early drafts of the script, it was the Fourth Doctor who makes it back to the Capitol. And Tom Baker read this draft of the script, and he put the kibosh on it, saying, no, I am currently no longer the Doctor, and unfortunately you're falling into this trap of everyone wanting Tom Baker back into the role of the Doctor. So it would have been the Four Doctors and Tom Baker. And legend says that he very rightly said, I don't want to take the attention away from the guy who's currently the Doctor at the present time. And that is a very noble reason to say no. Because one thing I will say, in lieu of the flaws of the Five Doctors, it does do a very decent job showcasing each of the other Doctors on their own terms. In particular, the Third Doctor still gets to be his usual badass self with the zip lining, with the cars, and with the thinking on his feet really well. And another thing I gotta say is that all the moments with the Second Doctor, all the way from his first scene going all the way to now, having never seen him prior to this time, I was immediately intrigued by this little man. I first saw him, I was like, oh, he's got himself a Mo Howard haircut. That immediately is endearment to me because I love the Three Stooges. And then to see him with the Brigadier, who I was familiar with because I was watching the Pertwee years, I get this. So I had this familiar character along with the Second Doctor, and all their stuff, I gotta say, was a lot of fun because you had the Brigadier being his usual snarky, sarcastic, skeptical self, and then you have the Second Doctor who is, very fun-spirited, very gleeful, very playful, playing off of it, and it definitely made me intrigued to want to see more of the Second Doctor in the times to come, and we will get to that. To the Five Doctors' credit, it did do a great job showcasing the Doctors individually, but this does lead to the one problem that a lot of multi-Doctor stories always seem to fall into the trap of. For myself, there are only 2, maybe 2.5, multi-Doctor stories that do exactly the one thing that we want to see in a multi-Doctor story, and that is specifically to see these Doctors together and zinging them off each other and seeing how they interact respectively. The 5 Doctors and the 2 Doctors, in fact, fail miserably at this because the whole joy, the whole anticipation we have of seeing a multi-Doctor story is to see these Doctors come together and seeing how they zing them off each other. And really, in the 5 Doctors, the only Doctors who take a shot every time I say Doctors, you die. The only Doctors we see together, like early on, is the 1st Doctor and the 5th Doctor, and they very promptly separate. And again, that's not what we want to see. We want to see these Doctors all come together and see how they zing them off each other, and we don't get that until they all converge at the top of the Tower of Rassilon, and that's where things finally start coming together, but the story's over almost immediately, and that's a shame. Whereas you got stuff like the 3 Doctors, where you're having a load of fun seeing the 2nd Doctor and the 3rd Doctor just not get along, and the 1st Doctor reprimanding them, which is great. And then you got Day of the Doctor, where 10 and 11 are acting like, mischievous brothers, and you got the War Doctor looking at them both like going, you two are freaking nuts. And then, of course, you got Time Crash, which is pure joy for the entirety of the 7 minutes of that entire thing. That's what we want to see. In the same reason why we love the Avengers. We want to see all these characters come together and play off each other, and that's the problem with the 5 Doctors, that's the problem with the 2 Doctors, that we don't see that until way late in the story, and that's just no fun. There's one thing the 5 Doctors did give us, which honestly I'm kind of sad that we have not seen them actually kind of take this idea and move it a bit forward, is the Rastin Warrior robots. There's a really wicked scene where the 3rd Doctor and Sarah Jane end up running afoul of this security drone, which comes in the form of this Silver Surfer-esque figure, which for budgetary reasons, they could only settle on a dancer in a silver Zentai suit and a chrome Mysterio-style hat, and with some pretty cheap editing techniques. But the thing is, the idea of it is incredibly cool. It's this robot that moves like lightning and is crazy fast, has arrows shooting out of it, and has like these blades that can like slice and dice and detects movements. And I gotta say, there is a wicked sequence where it slaughters an entire garrison of Cybermen. And even when I was just starting out, I was like going, man, this thing's kind of badass. And it was cool that the 3rd Doctor had to use the Cybermen as a distraction in order for them to get away. And I was like, that's really cool. And to this day, I'm always going, there's so much you can do with this. And I would love one day that the new series, especially with the technology we have, I would love to see them do something with the Rastin Warrior robot. Maybe try some new things, which would be so cool. And I would love it if they bring that back. And it's funny that they came up with this just because they needed a low-budget solution for the 3rd Doctor, because the 3rd Doctor was having too easy of a time getting up to the tower, so that he needed an obstacle, and that's what they gave him. And it was kind of a masterstroke. The 5 Doctors does have a lot of little fun things to it, and I will say the finale is great. The resolution of what happens with the big bad of the piece is actually really cool, and I will say the revelation of who it is, particularly when you go back and actually know the history with this particular character, it does make this final revelation of who the big bad is actually kind of work, particularly when you remember this character from episodes prior. And it does lead to a wonderful lesson regarding the nature of immortality. So there are little things to the 5 Doctors that I definitely love, and I will say because of where and when I was when I first saw it, it will always have a special place in my heart. But I'm not going to deny is that when you compare it to a lot of the other great multi-Doctor stories, and even just to other great Doctor Who stories on the whole, it falls short when it comes to being a competently made story on its own terms. But when it comes to celebrating Doctor Who as a whole, it serves its purpose just fine. Now, while I got you, another reason to buy the special edition DVD is that there is a hidden commentary on here with David Tennant, Phil Collinson, and Helen Raynor, and it is loads of fun. They are getting absolutely drunk, they're having biscuits and having champagne, and they're watching it, and they're having a great time, and it is loads of fun. I mean, I thought Riff Tracks did a pretty decent job, watching this movie, but I will say, on this DVD, that's where you'll find the real joy of watching this episode with friends. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think The Five Doctors is the best multi-doctor story? Or do you think that the concept has been done better elsewhere? Leave it all in the comments below. And keep it here on Narcotic Casserole because I'm going to have loads more episode spotlights to come, chronicling my evolution as a Doctor Who fan. So for now, like, share, subscribe, click, thou shalt be served. You had to go and let it get destroyed, Davison.